this is Roger, Croaky Roger, thanks for dropping by. Black cloth time, that must mean it's 2021 Project Orchids. So this will be part 3 of update 1, the Cattleya types. Probably out of the 4 parts, this is the one with the more dodgy plants than any of the other parts, but they were included. We will follow them through up to and including their death if necessary. We'll see how it goes. I just had a mad panic. I just came out here and turned the camera on and it didn't work, and I thought, I do not need my camera to fail. I really don't. There's no backup, you know. I mean, I can't use my phone, it's old and manky and the camera's lousy on it. So that would have been a big deal. Unfortunately, it was just I'd left it on. So the battery had run down. Now that's got an auto shut off, but it does go on to standby mode, and standby mode is obviously still using some power as opposed to powering the thing right off. Anyway, we have backup batteries, that's what they're for. So let's get on and have a look at the Cattleya types. Right, and first up, we've just done a care collab on this one, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we are coming at the plants from a different point of view here because we're monitoring the progress rather than how to look after them. Different subject really, even though same plants are included. Anyway, back in March, this plant had not long been repotted, strapped in its holy clay pot, and it was split in two, so it was, if it hadn't been strapped in with wires, it would have wobbled all over the place. These are very tall, leggy plants, the purpuratas. None of this short, stubby, sturdy stuff. Nope, let's do long and lanky. And these are one of the taller Cattleya types. At this particular point in time, we had one new growth, actually both new growths were showing. One of them is to the front, towards the left of the plant, and comes about halfway up the height of the plant, and then the other one is sort of slightly towards the back, pointing out to the right, and is considerably smaller. But at this particular point in time we didn't have very good roots at all. But like with all Cattleyas, once you've got new growth growing, you know you're going to get some roots at some point. Now whether those roots are going to come halfway up the size of the new pseudo bulbs or wait till they mature, and some roots come out as they start growing. But in this particular case we didn't have a very good root system at all, but we had a new growth on each piece. So I was looking forward to these maturing and getting some roots underneath them. So let's go and have a look and see what we actually got. Okay, last time we looked at this one, I discussed that it had been repotted, and in the repot process it was split into 2 plants to get the parts in the pot, basically, because it was a long, thin, straight rhizome that just didn't fit. So I cut it in half and pointed the 2 in opposite directions. We had 2 leads, one of which had pushed out, not unexpectedly, you know, but hopefully it was going to do it, and it did, so that was good. Now those 2 new growths that were there last time have grown on. This one in particular is the leaf and bulb height is bigger than anything else on the plant. It hasn't developed its width yet, it hasn't swollen up properly, but, and I'll take this opportunity to put a question out that I was asked specifically in a comment on the Care Collab about this plant. And the question was, how do you stop the leaves bending over at the top of the pseudo bulb? Yeah? Now that will happen for one of 2 reasons normally. There could be other reasons, but the main 2 reasons will be too much nitrogen in the plant will produce a sappy growth. Plenty of it, but it'll be soggy. It won't have the structure and the sturdiness. And the other reason will be just too little calcium, which is the main ingredient to give it its strength. So my answer to the comment was either too much nitrogen and or not enough calcium. Yeah? So to give a plant its strength and its sturdiness, and to get the spikes to stand up straight, and hold their blooms without needing to be tied up and all that sort of stuff is calcium. Get the calcium in there. It provides the cell structure with sturdiness and strength. And that applies, you know, if you're talking about cells, you're talking about the whole plant, aren't you? Every bit of the plant is made up of cells, and it's calcium that gives it its rigidity. Is that a proper word? Anyway, sidetracked. So what we've got on this is growth progress. This piece has roots, not bad. It's maturing a growth. It's not going to grow any longer, but it will swell up. It will become a larger pseudo-bulb in width terms. The other growth is pushing on. This may well still proceed to gain height as well as width. But you can see this one is smaller than this one. Last time we looked at this plant, I was worried about yellowing round the base. Well, I didn't need to worry, basically. That's all disappeared. What you do need to watch, though, is if you've got very high humidity, is these bits. Yeah? There is room for air down in there. If you look, there's a little gap. It's not attached. Yeah? Some sheaths, when you've got a job to get them off, they are so attached. But when they're loose like this, you can get condensation, especially if you spray your plants or you've got very high humidity. And if it sticks in there, you can cause some rot. So go steady with these. If in doubt, take them off, but you will lose some of the rigidity. Having just made that word up, I've used it again now. Because basically this bit is holding this part at this angle. Yeah, so go steady taking those off. If in doubt, put a split, yeah, so that moisture can escape if you think it's getting trapped in there. But that can cause some rot, and then you lose your new growth, you know, which is your potential for blooming, obviously, hopefully, and all that stuff. Yeah. Okay, so this one's doing okay. I don't think it's going to bloom on either of these growths. I think we will have to wait for the next two. So I don't think we're going to see blooms on this. If it was going to bloom, I suspect the sheaths would have formed by now on those two growths, and they haven't. So I don't think it's going to bloom on these growths. May be surprised, but I really don't think so. But the plant itself is coming on. Having had a major disturbance, it's pulling on nicely now. Right. This plant was selected on the grounds that I was hoping it was going to pull on. But by the time we got to the initial look, already the plant had gone downhill, lost its leaves, no roots. It had been repotted, but at this particular point in time back in March, I suspected that this plant was dead and was not going to grow. But I said, at the time, I said, well, we'll leave it in. We'll water it with the other plants and see what happens. Because sometimes orchids will just surprise you, and what looks like a dead plant will just push out a new growth from somewhere. So that's all that could be hoped for, was to get a new growth. The new growth would then have hopefully produced some roots. But with no leaves, no roots, and no new growths, I think we ought to read the last rites. Anyway, let's see what happened. Now, last time we looked at this one, it looked dead. No change. I don't expect this plant to pull through, but it is part of the project, so each time I will film it until such time as it rots away or falls apart or whatever. But basically, these canes are still solid. I know they're discoloured, but they are still solid. But there is no sign of new growth anywhere. I mean, that was a possibility, but that's not going to go anywhere. And there's no sign of roots, so there is no sign of life on that plant at all. I suspect it's going to stay like that or get worse. I don't see it getting better, quite honestly. Right, again, recent care collab on this, so I won't go too mad on it. But again, we're looking at these plants from a different perspective. Now at this particular point in March, I hadn't had the plant that long. It was a relatively recent acquisition. I didn't like what it was in, so it had come out of that and gone into a holy clay pot, like most of my Cattleya types end up. If they don't go on a mount, they usually end up in there. I think I can say that across the board. So we had some roots. We didn't have a lot of root growth at this particular point in time, but we had a stable plant. In other words, we had a plant that had nice green leaves, healthy looking pseudobulbs, and had good potential to grow on through that growing season. But at this particular point in time, it wasn't doing much. So my hopes for it in March were that we'd get one or more new growths, which would be good, and a decent amount of root growth, as there wasn't a huge amount. Although some roots had started to grow, it wasn't exactly putting its back into it, let's put it that way. Nonetheless, it had made a start. And, you know, after a repot with a Cattleya, that's all you can hope for, because you do often lose your root system on a repot. That's why it pays to keep your timing right and make sure there's some new roots on their way. Can't always do that if it's in bad media, which was the case here. So let's see what we got then. Right, with this one, on the surface of it, it doesn't look like it's changed that much, apart from the mass of roots it's actually produced in the last 3 months. But on closer inspection, there is a lovely new growth starting here. So it is pulling up a new growth. Now, effectively it's got 2 leads. This is a lead here, and at the base, it looks like a new growth is just starting. Can't guarantee that, but that is a swelling, and it has got the purple coloration of an active eye. So this could be about to produce a new growth here as well as here. Now, whether this is going to bloom on the latest growths, I doubt it. That would be this one and this one. It may well be that I just haven't had the plant long enough, it hasn't settled in, but this is a highlight orchid, it's getting that. So it's getting the light. I can't see that being a problem. I mean, if Laelia purpurata blooms in here, then this one should. Yeah, similar circumstances and conditions required. So anyway, all I can say with this one is it's grown a massive root system. Well pleased with that. Some of them were quite long and about to become aerial, so I bent them round the top of the pot so that the branches could go down in the pot. So we've got lots of good roots on this one. Latest 2 leaves have produced leads have produced nice leaves. Looks like this yellowing leaf, that's on the oldest little tiny pseudobulb. That may drop off soon. And we have a new growth. So it's progressing, it's doing okay. Okay, now this one was one of the plants I ordered from Schwerter. In that Schwerter order, I ordered 4 and got 8. No, Schwerter were not being generous. An anonymous donor added some plants in by a bit of trickery, because I'd mentioned that the order was coming via Lynn. In other words, I'd told Lynn what I wanted, and she'd added them into the order, because it was quite a large order, quite a lot of plants coming back. And this anonymous individual decided that for my birthday he would contact Lynn and add another 4 plants in. So when I turned up at Lynn's to pick up my 4, there was 8. But this was one of mine. This was one that I chose. I'd actually looked through their catalogue sort of thing online and chose this one because I really, really did like the blooms. And it would be nice in the not too distant future to actually see aforementioned blooms. But this had been mounted, very poor roots, quite honestly, and it was 2 pieces. There's a little tiny piece towards the back of the mount with its leaves hanging out to the bottom right hand side. They're quite desiccated even back in March, and I didn't expect that little piece to actually survive, but it was worth a go. You know, it's always worth a try, you never know. A good strong new growth out of that little thing could have pulled it back. But in March that hadn't happened, obviously, it hadn't been on the mount long. And the other piece was sturdy, leaves weren't desiccated or anything, pretty poor root system, but a healthy plant, if you know what I mean. So that part of the plant, the expectation was a new growth and some roots, which is the normal progress of Cattleyas, you know, that haven't got too good a root system. They push up a shoot and out come the new roots. So let's see how we did with that one. Last time we looked at this, it hadn't long been mounted, and I would suggest it was surviving okay, but not really doing anything. Now, you have to accept that this is two plants, one little piece I decided to keep, even though I didn't expect anything from it. And that's this little piece here. It's tucked round the back. It consists of this bulb here with those leaves, and this bulb here with these leaves. And it's never going to do anything unless it produces a shoot. It's got no roots, so it's just desiccating. So I will probably just tug it out of there eventually. There's actually 3 bulbs on it, that one as well. But you can see they've had it basically, so that needs to come off, tidy the plant up a bit. But since last time, what we've got now is a lovely strong new growth pushing out with new roots. So this plant will now progress probably at a rate of knots, given that growth. It is highly likely it will bloom on this growth, highly likely. Although it's not a huge plant, it's got a nice big bulb here, a bulb here, a bulb here that almost bloomed. It produced a sheath, so it was thinking about it, yeah. And now it's got another new growth. That is enough for it to push out blooms as long as it's got the roots to back it up. So we shall have to see what happens. So I just saw it was water. These have just been watered, so they're a bit dribbly all over my black cloth. Anyway, I'm pleased that that's got a nice new growth, and as a consequence is now producing some roots. They're going down in the moss. They will attach and make the plant feel a lot more secure. And next time I look at this, I'm not doing it now because I'm in the middle of filming, but I will take that little piece out and get rid of what is, you know, not worth keeping. It's not, even if it does shoot out a new growth, it's got no backup. It's got no roots. It's loose. It's not even tight on the mount, and the leaves have now totally desiccated. So there's no point in keeping that piece. We'll dump that, and then we'll see how it goes. But I'm pleased that we've got the new growth as expected. But, you know, you can expect things and they don't always happen. So we've got the growth, we're now getting the roots. So this, you know, that should be a mature growth in the, probably by the next time we look at the plant. Who knows, we may even have some blooms. Although that's probably wishful thinking, that's a bit quick. Anyway, doing okay. Now we've gone from the quite large to the ridiculously small. And I can very, very safely say this is my tiniest Cattleya type. One of the Sophronitis that I think across the board they got reclassified as Cattleyas. Fair enough, you know, but great contributors to the hybridizations that have gone on with Cattleyas because they impart their dwarfness. So these tiny little plants make big plants a lot more manageable by incorporating them, and by including, most of the Sophronitis are red, by including those, colours from the other part of the hybrids were darkened, so you could get pink turning into purple and things like that, or even a splash of red on a lip or something like that. But anyway, this was one of the hitchhikers to the Striata order, so this was one of the birthday present plants. At the time I said I'm not that happy with this clay thing that it's on, clay log I think it's called. It does help keep the roots cool, it's got that going for it, but to me it doesn't have a lot else going for it. And at this time I was discussing whether it would stay on there longer term, because the roots didn't seem to be attaching, but then they might not have been on there long. So what I wanted was new roots to see if they would attach. At this particular point we had 2 new growths, a tiny little one off to the left at the back, and just about visible on the right hand side, about halfway up the plant. So we had a couple of new growths and a reasonable root system. Quite happy with that. Right, now we're into one of the true miniatures. This will be by far my smallest Cattleya type, by quite a long way as well. Last time we looked at this, we had a new growth coming out to the right and a very small one coming out to the left. Both of those have pushed on okay. This one is maturing, and it's produced an awful lot more roots in the process. So it's now got a very, very healthy root system. It's got a better root system than some of the bigger plants I've got. So I'm still not happy with it staying on this clay thing, because these roots are not attaching. They're just riding alongside. They're not actually attaching. And without that attachment, the plant will always feel insecure. Now sometimes that means it throws out more roots to try and get a grip, if you know what I mean. Come on, get a grip. Anyway, I'm pleased with its progress. All I can hope for is that at some point we actually get some blooms on this so that I can see what they're like. Yeah, it's growing okay. The two new growths have matured okay. The root activity is extensive. So it's a healthy little plant pushing on nicely. It's never going to be a big plant, but they can grow into large plants for the size of the bulbs. You know, I mean, if you could imagine, you know, if this plant had 50 bulbs on it, it would be a large plant, but the bulbs wouldn't be any bigger. It would just cover a larger surface area, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I'm pleased with the progress on that one. It's coming on okay. Now that came in the Schwerter order, and it wasn't one I chose. This was one of the presents that was put in for my birthday. Yes, yeah. There were some plants that hitched a ride in the Schwerter order that were added in as a present. I still don't know who added those in, but I'm happy that they're happy, not to say. So that's good stuff. Anyway, doing okay. Well pleased with that little one. Right, my BC Maikai is well, it's a disaster area really. There is nothing good to say about this apart from the fact it's not dead yet. But it's only just not dead. I think it might even be dead but just doesn't know it yet. But what we've got is a failed plant. The root system just collapsed and died, and it lost some of its leaves around that time. But it's kept some, and the fact that it's kept some leaves and they are still green, there is hope that this plant may recover. But I decided that, okay, if you're going to recover, you're not going to get a huge amount of help. And basically I've got quite a high-sided pot to help hold humidity in, and put some damp moss in the bottom, and the plant was basically standing on damp moss, and that's the help it was going to get. That was all it was going to get, apart from keeping it damp, not wet, just moist. The idea is that at some point or another it would start to shoot out again, and with those shoots would be some roots. And if it can do that, then it will have a chance to recover. But it's so far off ever being a good plant again. I'm still debating whether to keep it or not. So you'll have to wait and see if it's still with us or not. But it's doing no harm, it's not in my way, and who knows, it may recover. And as a project plant, obviously we keep it and give it a chance. And excuse me, last but not least is this object. Every time I look at this or I put some water on it, I think, why are you still here? But it is, and as it was chosen as, well, it got put in as one of the project plants to see if it was going to do anything. And last time we looked at it, it was doing absolutely nothing. So there was no progress whatsoever. It's not doing a lot more now, but there is one new growth started there. There's no, oh, actually, no, those are broken bits. I was just going to say that it looks like there's some white root tips there, but they're not. False impression. Oh. hopes came up then. But the leaves are starting to get more desiccated. A few have fallen off, so there's less now than there was last time. And it's a long way from recovering, a very long way. You know, even if this new growth pushes on and produces a few roots, that's not a plant, it's just a growth. And that is not going to be enough to support this plant long term. Now luckily there's still some green leaves on there, so it can sort of feed itself despite not having any roots. And there may be the odd root or two in the middle of that tangle that can actually allow some hydration, you know, even though they look awful. Whoops, it's Hurricane Hector. Let me just turn that off. Oh, I can't turn it off, can I? I'll be back. Right, where was I? The reason I thought I couldn't turn that off is obviously this table has plants on it, and I'd put them on the floor out of the way so that I could film right in the way of the switch that turns the humidifier off, so I didn't think I was going to be able to get at it, but we stretched and we found a long pointy stick that could get to the switch, because I certainly couldn't reach it. Right, so I'm going to leave this in the project, and you know, we'll see what that sign of life actually achieves. As I said, if it can grow to half size and push a few roots out, it'll give the plant a chance, but it's a hell of a long way from ever being anything reasonable. If I see another one of these that looks a good plant, I will just get it and this will go in the bin. Because it's not, you know, I've got to sit here and look at that in my grow room and I don't like it. It's just, I think it's too far gone. But we will leave it. It still has some green leaves and it's at least trying to put a new growth out. I suspect, just to put the mockers on it, it will rot and will not progress. But we shall see. Anyway, it can go back on its moss and see what happens. I'm just leaving it to its own devices. It's not getting any special treatment. I mean, I could try the bag treatment and actually just bundle it up in a bag. So that it's got very high humidity, a close atmosphere, and see if that would help. But the chances are if I did that at the moment, that new growth would rot. So I'm just going to leave it to its own devices and we'll see what it's done by the next time we come round to film. So there we go. So there we go, that was part 3, the Cattleya types. This is not a Cattleya type, I'm just pointing the camera at something to look at. It's just a no ID Miltoniopsis that is pushing out high fragrance. It's actually making the whole grow room quite fragrant today. We've got a little bit of warmth in here today, which is typical because I don't want it, because I'm trying to film and I've turned all the kit off. So it's getting quite hot in here. I'm just about to fire that up again. But yeah, it's a nice attractive Miltoniopsis. Not part of the project, but doing okay. Anyway, as far as the Cattleya types are concerned, as you can see, part 3 contains more not so good plants than the other parts. That's just how it goes, and I've always said with these project orchids, I don't want them to be the best plants. You need a variety. You need some that are struggling so that we can see if they progress or if they don't and go downhill. And I think there's one in this particular part that's probably not going to make it till next time, and that may be 2. They won't get replaced, not halfway through the project. That won't happen. So anyway, part 4 will follow on. Part 4 is endearingly called The Others. So it's a mix of a variety of orchid types. So we'll get onto that one soon. It needs to be soon or I'll have run out of June, won't I? So it'll be next week sometime. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.